Arrowhead Allies 8-0 edition. I know things get slightly better here every week. It's what we do here as the Chiefs have stormed to an 8-0 start. And to talk about it, we're going to be welcoming our good friend, Kansas City Chiefs kicker from 1980 through 1993, Nick Lowery's here to get a little 8-0 rep right here, baby. Nick, how you doing, my friend?
Hey, let's not forget the 94 playoffs, man. We went to the AFC Championship game, and if Bruce Smith, who's become a good friend, hadn't hit Joe Montana after I kicked my second field goal, and we're only down 20-13 with Joe Montana on the 25-yard line going in to tie the score, and then Joe got maybe the worst concussion of his life and didn't get back in the game. So we were this close to going to the Super Bowl, and obviously proving how hard it is to get to the Super Bowl. And now we are like little kids, spoiled little kids with too much candy every day because we are so darn – this team, the Chiefs, are so ridiculously good. I think we got to remember that.
100%. And Nick, just starting off, just this crazy game. Obviously, we're down Jalen Watson, who's out in the secondary at corner. Najee Johnson was down with a concussion. It's a little bit of a rough game for Josh Williams. They brought Chris Roland Wallace, a rookie, down and played a little bit of that slot. What did you see from the defense giving up those 24 points, especially that last drive for a touchdown?
You know, I just think the tackling was not what we're used to. Normally, remember in the Super Bowl season from 2019-20, our defense was not that great, but we found a way to make plays. But our tackling for several years was, pretty average. And the last couple of years, it's been extraordinarily good. I mean, yards after the catch were kept to a minimum. And last night it was raining. I don't know exactly what it was. Some could say, which this is a mature team, maybe they looked a little bit like, hey, it's Tampa and they don't have their great receivers in place. Shouldn't be that hard. But I don't think that's the way these guys think. But they were not playing with the intensity on defense that they usually do. They still held them to some degree, but I think the tackling was not what I was used to.
Nick, and first of all, man, it's an honor to talk with you. But the thing we see with this team is how battle tested they are. Before the show, Shaggy was talking about that, about this team is battle tested, and that's something they've been for quite some time now. And we know that the kicker position, you know that better than anybody here on the show, is a position that is very fight or flight. You have to make a lot of, you have to be very mentally strong to be able to do your job because it's the most unique position on a football team. And there's something about Harrison Butker that I think has been widely understated. I think Harrison Butker, obviously the high percentage, 89%, second greatest of all time, that's something to be praised for. But there's also something about how clutch this guy is in big moments.
Absolutely.
And I think it's because of the fact, and this is just my theory, and I want to get you to expand on it if you could. I think it's because of the fact that essentially since he jumped into the Kansas City era of his career when he was on the Panthers practice squad, he took on the Mahomes era, which meant the elevation of pressure was on him from pretty much day one. And I think that he realized, I'm either going to make the most of my career here or I'm going to be cut and they're going to find somebody else. And since day one, this guy has taken on the job and has been just an extraordinary kicker. He's had some PAT problems, but the point is that every single time this team has needed him to make a big kick, he has delivered. Do you think it's a fight or flight thing with Harrison where he just got that it factor in him? Is that just what he is? It's just built in him?
I don't know if we call it fight or flight, but I think that Harrison I think he's the best kicker in the NFL. I think he's surpassed Justin Tucker. I'm not just saying that. I mean, I really think Justin Tucker is unbelievable. And when you start in an era where you have 3 or 4 games and suddenly you're the greatest ever, should go to the Hall of Fame, people prejudge too much, but he's put together all these years now, making every single big kick, especially in the big games. So, putting us into the Super Bowl, in the Super Bowl itself, last year, 57-yard field goal with a high snap. And what happens then, just a little technically, he had a little less time, right? He still has to get the ball off in under 1.3 seconds. Ball's down on the ground, has even less time, probably 1/10 of a second or less with the ball not spinning to kick it. He hits it low, but right through. And, that is the only reason we made it into overtime. So he is great. And given what he had to deal with this offseason with some unbelievably unfair criticism of him for expressing his faith at a faith-based institution. Certainly, he didn't shy away from expressing himself, but he also didn't shy away from taking responsibility and saying, hey, I don't apologize for it. It's my faith. And so just like anybody else has a right to express themselves as well, especially, let's face it, in the Midwest, near Kansas City. So I have so much respect for him. And most importantly, maybe more than even his performance, is what his teammates feel about him and say about him, which is he's just a great person. So my friend, Dr. Andrew Jacobs, has worked with him. And people ask me if I, talk to him, coach him. I'm like, I stay away, man. I don't want to screw it up.
Nick, we are seeing an era where kickers are completing just unbelievable feats of long field goals. I mean, back when you were playing, you're obviously one of the great kickers of your time and of all time. 3-time Pro Bowler. I mean, so many memorable
seven different All-Pro teams during my career.
That says it all. And these days, you've got a guy like Tyler Bass who lines up and makes a 61-yard field goal, and he's a kicker that struggled and has been nearly out of a job at times. And we just say, 61-yard field goal walk-off. And at the same time, on College Game Day, I don't know if you watch College Game Day on Saturdays, they got people trying 33-yard field goals. And Nick, it's never been so disastrous. People are not able to line up and hit it. There's hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line.
They wouldn't
and
hit
they're striking them.
Yeah, it's so much harder than people think. And just here's a couple quick stats for you. First of all, you got to get the ball not only accurate, but you have to hit it over 11 guys, averaging, the guys in the middle of the line are 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". They've got 35 to 40-inch vertical leaps. They've got 35-inch arms. So you've got to get it 12 feet high within 21 feet, within 20 feet. So I want you to think about how high that is within 21 feet as one more factor. So, yeah, the ability to kick a field goal is not as easy as you think. And then you're actually seeing the ball for under 0.2 of a second as it's spinning and stops spinning. And then you have to hit it through those tiny uprights that look like tweezers during a game when there are, 10, 15 million people watching on TV and 80,000. So, yeah, I do mention that Brian Barker, our former punter, myself, Jan Stennert has brought it up to me. If you look at the stats from about 10 years ago, when they started breaking the balls in, the balls are broken in. They make a big deal out of inflate gate or deflate gate. And yet this is every single week the balls are broken in. So if you're looking at the stats, the average punt, average kickoff, average field, everything went up 5 yards. Boom. And so kickers are better. Field conditions are much better. I used to say kicking on game fields now is more like kicking out of the fairway, whereas you used to hit out of the rough. Now it's almost like a putting green. You got to give credit to the landscaping crew, which was born out of George Toma, one of my dear friends, the sod father himself, the one that did all of the Super Bowls for about, 30 years or something. So it does make it easier. Kickers are better, and the standards are higher too. I mean, you miss one, and look at all the really long field goals now. It really is extraordinary, and you got to give them credit. Tyler Bass, that's the same Tyler Bass that, thank God, missed that field goal, right? That gave us a chance to beat Buffalo and keep on going. So,
yeah,
everybody's human. We got to remember that. We know, for instance, a guy named Patrick Mahomes, for the first game out of 8, he didn't throw an interception, right?
Yeah.
And yet we also know, because we see him in full context, he's the winningest, most winning quarterback we've ever seen. I put him above Joe Namath. I think if we win 3 in a row, which I think we have a real good shot to do if we stay healthy, especially if we get back Juju Smith-Schuster and maybe Hollywood Brown, that makes our offense look pretty scary. And if we solve particularly our left tackle, but our tackle issues in protecting the quarterback, then just watch out, because Kareem Hunt's been extraordinary. Then you got Isaiah Pacheco coming back. Then you've got Samaje Perine, who's, I think, great. I mean, we have a great stable of running backs. And then we haven't even mentioned Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So a little bit more protection savvy, defense continuing to improve, stay healthy, because Jalen Watson, that is, when you combine that with L'Jarius Sneed, that, those are some big losses. But that's the measure of a great team. Let's wipe the slate clean. The thing that stands out the most is, as bad as we played at times last night, we keep finding a way to win. And the level of efficiency, if you guys heard the radio broadcast from the Tampa Bay radio network, they were already plunging knives into their chests during the final drive. They knew, just like the Super Bowl, we were just going to go right down the field. The focus and efficiency when our buddy Patrick is dialed in, there is nothing like it. And you got to combine that, of course, with amazing play calling. So this is the thing. I'm sure you guys have talked about it, but I'm just going to mention it. Marty, if we had a play that was going to work, Marty was not always afraid to say, we're going to look you in the eye and tell you we're going to run the same play and we know you can't stop it. Andy will know that too, but he won't run it twice or three times. He'll hold it back. And then when we really need it in the fourth quarter with a minute, 10 seconds left with one timeout, whatever, he brings in those things. So he holds things back. I also think that Steve Spags does the same thing. He knows certain plays, certain, rushes and blitzes will work, certain plays, certain schemes, but they hold back a little bit more than a lot of other coaching staffs do, because they know in the end, those final 2, 3, 4 minutes, that's nut cutting time and overtime. And that's why we are so scary. And this team goes to a different gear. You know how most cars have 4 or 5 gears? We go to like 7th gear in those situations.
Yeah.
100%.
Appreciate you joining us again today, Nick. Always love having you on.
I love the fashion show, man. We got the man with the coolest beard, Lance. Then you've got an awesome beard, Shaggy Shane.
I appreciate you.
I mean, hey, we got a fashion parade. I mean, I love it.
Hey, Nick, when you came to the Chiefs and started kicking for us in 1980, we still had quarterbacks holding, but you did have punter Bob Grubb as your holder. But still, throughout the early 80s, you had Steve Fuller and Bill Kinney as your holders.
Yeah.
And then in the early 90s, it began to transition to the punters being the holder.
Right.
When you started every season from your rookie season, throughout your career, did you see the transition from the quarterback being the holder to the punter being the holder? What did you like about that transition, or did you like it? Well,
initially I thought you had to have a mystical Buddha-like relationship with that holder. I'd been cut by 8 teams 11 times. I just, to trust that holder. Bob Grubb was a pretty good holder. Steve Fuller was an amazing holder. Len Dawson loved the chance to be a holder. He had magical hands. Steve Fuller had magical hands. Bill Kinney had very good hands. Steve Pullor was my holder 90, 91, 92. I mean, so he was really good for a couple of years. And that 90 season, I had 24 in a row. 91, I had 22 in a row. 21 in a row. 92, was 22 for 24. And, by that time, I'd had about 14 different holders. So after a while, you basically notice the guys that like to put in the work. And if you put in the work like Brian Barker did, you ended up being pretty good. I was a little concerned when they let go of Tommy Thompson, because what he had become when he wanted to focus. Tommy was a little spacey at times. Great punter. He was a great holder. And that transition, when you're at that level, 1 or 2 bad holds. It could simply be that the ball's on the ground and a great holder knows how to still get it up in time so you can see it. I'll give you an example. Brian Barker, game-winning field goal, left hash, 37 yards. I remember these things against, I think it was Cleveland. Look it up, 1993 season. Game-winning field goal, and the snap's way back here, way behind him. He catches it, and I just simply slow down everything, including my leg. I just knew I could slow it down just enough so that he had time to get the ball down, and it sort of slowly went up and through, and we had a game-winning field goal. early in that season with Joe Montana. And then the next week we had a nice little game 5 field goals against on all our points against the Broncos on national TV. And the next morning, USA Today's headline at the top of the page was "Kicker Upstages Montana," which I showed to Joe, and he gave me this sign. Oops. Joe didn't like me. He was used to kickers being like little kids,
Yeah, I remember a lot of your game-winning kicks. I remember a lot of your game-winning kicks. That's why I was just curious. I remember the game-winning kick you had against the Chargers in '86 in San Diego when I think Bill Kinney was your holder. So I was just curious if you liked that transition from quarterback to punter.
You just don't think that way. There was a theory that the quarterback had just come off an incomplete pass on 3rd down, and so he'd be a little bit down. So he might not be as focused, but Bill was a professional. And here's a difficult concept for some people: you put the team ahead of your feelings.
Right.
Get the damn thing done. Make the field goal. Score the points. Whatever you have to do. And a coach and obviously the scouts and particularly the general manager will notice the guys that clearly have that. And what's great about this team is that's who they are. I mean, as much as you want to say about Travis Kelce doing 4,000 different advertisements and Patrick Mahomes, which they do, they always put the team first. And they make sure all their teammates know that too. So, and they own their stuff, right? I mean, Patrick will be the first to say, I screwed up, So I love the fact that here we are not playing that well and still finding ways to win. And just watch out, because as you remember, on Christmas, the day was it Christmas Day against the Raiders?
Yes.
And we had a lousy game. And had a lousy game, and it was the end of the world. And then we went from 4th gear to 7th gear the next week, and it was over. See ya. Wouldn't want to be there.
Well, Nick, you mentioned Christmas Day, so I wanted to ask you just. I know the team, they have to focus week to week, take the next opponent and not look too far ahead. But us here, we're not on the team, so we can be prognosticators, look ahead, get in our crystal ball. I'm going to make you Andy Reid, Nick, and it gets to that Christmas Day game. The Chiefs play the Texans on a Saturday. Then they play the Steelers on Christmas on a Wednesday. It's a short turnaround. We're undefeated at that moment. We've locked up the 1 seed. Do you play your starters down the stretch, or do you sit them getting ready for that playoff run and try to get for the future?
Okay, if I'm Andy Reid, I'm going to remember last year I was at the extra game, the 17th game. I came with my friend who's a big Chiefs fan, Russell Hitchcock, the lead singer for Air Supply. I brought him to 2 games
love Air Supply.
in Kansas City. I'm all out of love.
I'm so lost without you.
And we were at SoFi Stadium, and we didn't have our best game, but we still found a way to win. And the guys were rested. I remember seeing, Kelce and Patrick on the sidelines, right? Out of shoulder pads, et cetera. And it was like, and if you think about it, I don't like the teams, like the Jets, my other team briefly, not playing their starters and not playing a guy that had missed virtually the entire previous season, even if he was a quarterback, not playing at all. You got to get used to, even as a kicker, I know it's got to get used to game conditions. And obviously there's a conditioning to being hit. And that's what Marty knew. But having said that, I think resting is for the most part good. And you could argue if they come in for a quarter, is it really worth it? So that's the judgment of the coach. It worked last year like a dream. And I would say the argument would be to do the same thing. Why? Because our bye week was so early this year. We're going to need a break at the end of the season. And by the way, for the listeners, if you didn't know this, it was a 14-game season way back in 74. Then they switched.
Yeah.
And then it became 16. Now it's 17. It's probably going to become 18 in the next couple of years. So, you do have to be careful about the conditioning, not just the aerobic conditioning, but just all the pounding guys' bodies take. So,
Yeah, just for the record, it's not every day that you have the Chiefs all-time leading scorer compliment you on your beard game, so I just wanted to throw that out there. That's pretty awesome. My ego is definitely inflated today, so thank you.
Lance, I also want to say, I always say this about guys with beards like you and Shaggy, is how's your earned run average? Because most of the guys that have beards like you guys have like 1.6 earned run averages. You know, you always have good earned run. So are you a relief pitcher for the Royals too in your spare time or what?
I can throw a knuckle curve. I'm a lefty, man. Yeah, but you know, Nick, you know, you brought something up, and first of all, I love the fact that you alluded to the optimism that's coming with the health that's coming the Chiefs' way on the offensive side and defensive side, also with Charles Omenihu in the coming weeks. But you mentioned Pacheco, you mentioned potential Hollywood Brown. Obviously, Juju Smith-Schuster is going to return at some point. But you know, you did mention something earlier, and Clint, I know you want to close your ears on this because it has to do with the offensive line. But Nick, you did talk about the one real true problem on this team, and it is the left tackle. And I'm somebody, and the guys that are sitting on this panel know very well where I stand on this, is that I think the Chiefs are making a major mistake right now. I think that they're playing a guy out of position, out of fear. I think that Kingsley Suamataia was brought here to be the left tackle. He struggled early, and I think the Chiefs panicked. And I think they moved off of him a little too quickly, and that's a position, and I'm not trying to tell you how it is. You played this game, but you have to learn sometimes through the fire. You have to cut your teeth through the live rounds. And I understand it's a risk, but it's an even bigger risk to me to stun his growth and put Wanye Morris over there, who's been getting beat senselessly every single week and is not putting up good grades every single week. So he's not an upgrade. So I'm sitting here and I'm confused, and I need you to kind of lead me to the water here of what the hell is happening here, because I think Kingsley is missing opportunities to develop into that left tackle. Do you agree, or do you see it differently?
Well, I don't, okay, I love the way in media they're going to take everything out of context. So I'm still going to put in my context, which is I am a kicker. I'm not Andy Reid. I'm not the former left tackle for Jim McMahon at BYU. But I'm going to give you the common sense answer that I believe echoes what you're saying, which is it really impossible to have Kingsley come in every third series for 10 plays, 8 plays, whatever, and do that at least once in the first half, once in the second half, for that very reason? Because when you've got film on you against a real person, because they never go at that same rate in practice, right? And when you've got, a powerful guy. What was the name of the guy from Samoa, from Tampa? Huge guy.
Vita Vea.
Yeah, scary guys. He put so much pressure on Wanye, and also, maybe it rests him so he's a little bit more fresh, right? If every third series Kingsley comes in and they talk about, each other, they communicate as well. For that reason also, when you play your non-starters, I think it probably does a little bit for team morale going into the playoffs, just a little bit, because there's nothing like playing in a game. It's just a few plays, just to feel like you've done it under fire. But Andy is, every great coach is a great psychologist. Mike Tomlin, I love him. Mike Tomlin is a little bit like Marty Schottenheimer. In the playoffs, he's not been winning. And what separates out Andy Reid and Spags is their ability to make adjustments in the game, particularly at halftime. Before Andy went in last night, he interviewed him at halftime. He said, we're going to make some adjustments, and I just love to see how they adjust to what's happening in the game. That's a different level of intelligence. And here's my other piece that makes the Chiefs and Mike Veach hopefully more appreciated by some people is you can do all the stuff in the combine, bench press, 40-yard dash, cone drill, agility, character. But what it really is I call it the Teddy Bruschi factor, which is the kind of player that Bill Belichick looked for, Tom Brady looked for, and Andy Reid, et cetera, look for, which is in-game intelligence, the ability of a Duron Cherry, 4.8, 40, 4.7, whatever he was, but always there, anticipating, great vision. Marcus Allen, great wide set eyes, incredible vision. You want players that can see the field and can anticipate. They have that intelligence to apply a game plan that's a static game plan, has to be applied to the ad-lib jazz, if you will, music on the field. And that's why this team's so damn good, is the players come into that culture. It makes them raise their game because they know the standard that's expected of them, which is not just going through the game plan and say, I do this, but really visualizing. One of the best examples of that, by the way, Priest Holmes. I mean, in 3 years, the guy had almost 60 touchdowns. He had 60 touchdowns.
Yep.
And on a Saturday, for all of you out there that have kids, this is a great role model for you. Priest Holmes, after everybody left, would walk through or jog through every play on his own, visualize it on the field just one more time. Because as you watched him when he ran, he was the most decisive running back I've ever seen. He would just boom, 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 boom. No hesitation at all. And that means you're not self-conscious. The brain, I've studied this obviously as a kicker, how you manage your brain, how you manage your thoughts. When you're self-conscious, the crude muscle groups, the big muscle groups take over, but your quickness, whether it's your leg coming through to kick or whether it's your arm as a pitcher, which is why, by the way, a manager in the World Series better not be saying, don't throw it inside. Let the pitcher's natural speed and flow, or the running back, or the form of the tackling, athlete on the defense, whatever those are, all those things, your brain is moving so much faster than conscious thought. And you got players that understand that and have done their homework. And so they've rehearsed it like actors so that when it happens, it's just immediate instinct and reaction. And so team speed might be X on a board when they're running for a test, but in the game, the functional speed is that little edge that is the difference between being a good and a great team.
100%. Shane?
Hey, Nick, 10 years ago, whenever the new rule changed, it went from a 20-yard extra point to a 33-yard extra point. And what I noticed is kickers, rather than just be lined up, kick it straight down the middle, they wanted to pick either they wanted the right hash mark or they wanted the left hash mark. We saw Chiefs kicker Cairo Santos, the kicker previously before Harrison came here. He liked to kick it from the right hash mark. And Harrison Butker, at the beginning, when until I think 2 years ago, he liked it from the left hash mark, and then now he likes it right down the middle. If this rule came into play when you were kicking, would you pick a hash mark or would you stay dead center like Harrison Butker has done the last 2 years?
Hash mark, because what's great about the hash marks is they're aligned with the goalposts. So you know that you can just bring it in. If you're a golfer, you know how you've got that natural hook, which I never mastered, by the way. But yeah, you probably do choose a hash mark, and the coach should know that. Boomer Esiason, my former teammate for 2 years with the Jets, when they had that new order, he's like, I can hear Nick Lowery complaining. And he's right. I would have complained for 24 hours. But then I would have said, I was 562 of 568 on extra points, the highest percentage ever. Thank you. But I also, at 33 yards, I was at 97% from 33 and in. The average percentage is 92%. So I would have then thought it through and said, I'm giving my team, if I just keep doing what I've always done, a 5% improvement, which means one less miss every 20 kicks. And that's about one in a season. And how many times does that extra point, just like what happened with San Francisco and that extra point that allowed us to tie them, is one extra point can make a difference. It gives your team an edge. So it does put it in your head. They had the kicker for Tampa had to hit that extra point to put it in overtime. So it makes it more exciting. I would like to go to other rules changes. I think the one about putting it at the 30-yard line, if you kick it out of the end zone, I wish they'd made it the 35, because right now it's the 40 if you kick out of bounds. I think 35 would have made it a lot more difficult choice. Yeah. And more teams would go, hey, let's just lob it up really high to like the goal line, and you'd see even more returns.
100%.
Absolutely. Well, Nick, we cannot thank you enough. It's always a pleasure, man. We got an 8-0 team here heading to play the Denver Broncos here on Sunday at noon.
Yes.
Hey, you once kicked 5 field goals to beat the Denver Broncos all by yourself. That was probably
Monday
the game
Night Football.
I did not do it by myself. Joe Montana, Marcus Allen, JJ, Keith Cash, Neil Smith, Derek Thomas, Danny Salamua. But I did my role And it was pretty satisfying. Quick story on that. Huey Lewis was best friends with the singer
Montana.
Lewis in the News, and he was wearing a coat, and he was right next to the kicking net. And so I went out and kicked my fourth field goal, which I think was a 45 or 52 yarder. I think it was a 45 yarder. And he just kept seeing me running out field goal in the first half. And I kicked the fifth one in the second half. And when I came back for the fourth one, he looked at me and he goes, "You enjoy this, don't you?" And I'm like, hell yeah. It was so fun to have rock stars on the sideline. I think the Chiefs have some actors and stars there. Those are some of the really fun moments. And frankly, having a Joe Montana, he was a living rock star. I mean, it really was pretty awesome to have him. He would make jokes in the huddle and just keep everybody relaxed, and a very different style from Tom Brady. And, everybody has their unique style. I will say Patrick's the best, though. He is the real deal. He's relaxed. He's humble. Love him to death. He's awesome.
Love it, Nick. Thank you so much, my friend. Appreciate it as always, buddy.
Thank you, Nick.
You guys are awesome.
Always an honor. That's your Kansas City Chiefs all-time leading scorer and Hall of Famer, my friends. Thank you so much.
Nick Lowery, baby.